So this interview was recorded on November the 9th earlier this year, and it was a big part for my London Spitfire documentary, which, by the way, if you haven't watched already, you should definitely watch. I'm doing a $20 giveaway on Twitter, so if you want to enter that, just head down to the top line of the description. And yeah, that's really all there is to it. I hope you guys enjoy and have a Merry Christmas. So the first thing I have to ask is, when looking at the entire season holistically, how do you feel about how the season went?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's like too many things that we can complain about. Obviously, the finish of top six is like beyond any expectations. I think the fact that we finally got to a tournament at the end and performed like the way we wanted to was good, because maybe the only downside we had through the whole season was we felt at Hawaii we probably should have done better. Like we felt we were a better team than to finish last. We just kind of choked against Florida. And I think especially in the Junker Queen meta, we really felt like that was like a top three finish for us. Like really, like based on scrims before, at the very least, we'd obviously beat Houston in the official, we beat Toronto in the official. So again, to go out like early against Florida was disappointing. But with playoffs, we were finally able to overcome like one of the big top three teams, which we hadn't done all season. We were finally able to push in a position in a tournament like past like a disappointing level. And even though, I think there's an argument that we could have like done better, I think top six was probably a relatively fair assessment of where we were. And then obviously, like if we always talk about it, right, like bringing it back to where we were at the start of the season and what people expected, then it's almost impossible to complain about where the season went.
I guess like a kind of follow-up-ish to that with the whole expectation thing. You did an interview with Yiska at the start of this year, and you mentioned that like the first thing you did was keep realistic expectations with the Spitfire from the very beginning. Did those expectations ever fluctuate throughout the season?
I think absolutely. I think that like we went into like, if you said to us at the start of the season, would you ever like, we honestly said we're probably not going to compete even against teams like Washington and Toronto. Our goal was never to beat those teams. If we can, great, but it was never a situation where it's like, oh yeah, we need to beat these teams. But after stage one and especially after stage two, all of a sudden those type of fixtures that we looked forward to said, well, yeah, we should be winning it. Like we're clearly like in the same level as them. So expectations like certainly increased as the season went on, but it was important for us not to lose track of where we were, where we started, because obviously if you're like, oh, we should be competing against these teams, or if you change your expectations to, oh, we have to beat these teams, if you lose, then that can kind of like break the mental and snowball in the opposite direction.
What was the main difference between your guys' performance in the playoffs versus, you guys coming short against the Florida Mayhem in the Mid-Season Madness and Summer Showdown?
I think it's fundamentally just experience. I think the Hawaii was the first LAN event a lot of the team had ever been to. The problem that happened was that there was a mental, like if you consider just the mental, you go into Hawaii and we say whatever happens, happens. But then we beat Atlanta the way we beat them, and we play Shock so close. Like that Shock series was actually incredibly close on double flex support meta against like Shock. So then we went to Florida and it was like, oh, well, we're the favourites, we should win. And I think that adds a different type of pressure, which was sometimes difficult for us during the season. We were very good when we had like underdog mentality, but when all of a sudden we were the big dogs, when we had to be the ones that, I always think about it like this. In a game, there's like the reward for winning versus the downside of losing, right? Like if we play against Dallas tomorrow, right? The downside of losing is so small because who expects you to lose? It's Dallas, right? Whereas the upside of winning is like high, and that's like the underdog mentality. But what ends up happening sometimes, and I think this happened in both of our Florida series, both externally and internally, all of a sudden it was more embarrassing to lose than like a win was almost expected, if you know what I mean. And I think all of a sudden when things start to go wrong in series like that, that's when the mental side of it is difficult. If you go 0-2 down against Dallas, it is what it is. Like it's very easy to keep your head on straight. But if all of a sudden against a team that you should be beating, if things start to go wrong, that's when it's actually more difficult, I think, to keep your mentality and your focus in like the desire to win and not think about the consequences of losing.
I guess a follow-up to that is, how do you keep that mentality up when you are against a team that you are theoretically should be better than, you should beat?
The first thing is just the more times you play in those situations, the more experiences you have, the better it gets, right? Like your third tournament is always going to be better than your first. It's just inevitable. But we tried various mental activities during the season. Like one thing I've believed in was like there is like this idea that any adversity that you go through helps you in other adversity situations. So we would get the guys up at 8 a.m. before VOD review and just go for a team run. Like all of us would go out on the streets of LA and just run. And even though it's not the same as playing on stage against Florida, you don't want to do it, right? Your brain is telling you, no, we're not running at 8 a.m. What are you? You're crazy. What are you doing? So being able to push your brain, quiet the voices, and say, let's go. Stuff like that, we ended up like talking a lot about like the mental aspect of it. And then what we ended up doing for playoffs, which I think you've probably seen from the Twitter videos and stuff, was we tried to like go into like a different mentality. We realized in scrims, especially in this meta, if we went like big dog mode and we put in like 100% energy, maybe too much energy, we would literally just bark after we won a team fight, just as some sort of like, I don't know. It sounds stupid, but it kind of worked. And that like didn't allow us necessarily, didn't allow the time in our heads for the negative voices to creep in. And then we were, even when we lost the Spark and lost to Houston, it wasn't the same as the Florida losses, right? Like it wasn't a mental collapse. It was just they were the better team. And if you lose because a team is the better team, what can you say, you know? Whereas at least with the Florida losses, and I think like maybe one or two other results in the season, we came away from it thinking, no way they were better than us. We didn't play our level.
How do you get your players to do all the good habits, or like enforce a structure where you make them wake up at 8 a.m. and do that sort of thing?
Well, the important thing to note about the team runs is it was not mandatory. That's really important, because it was not, you have to get out of bed and go. It's, I'm going to run at 8 a.m. If you guys want to come, I would recommend it. And then what happens is there is a few guys who really believe in this side of it, right? Like I think Harry would always be like, oh yeah, I'm coming. And then that would eventually like mean that Landon was really, really like bought into this stuff. Then all of a sudden the guys that maybe don't want to go, they see a few guys already going, and it's like someone's like peer pressure, right? Like, oh, okay, I guess I'll go too. And yeah, that's how it all goes, I think.
What was like the key factor or factors that led to the underdog story, I guess, or narrative of the London Spitfire this season?
I think everyone who made like a tier list or a prediction at the start of the season made my job in terms of that aspect like very easy, right? I just had to like show them, yeah, everyone thinks you're going to finish 20th, and then that's it. Especially because a lot of the players came from last season too. I think the underdog mentality was like very easy to build into. Like it's almost impossible for us to have anything except an underdog mentality with the season past and what everybody's saying about you. So I think that was very natural for us, really.
Aside from like compositions, like what was the difference between you guys, especially at the start of the season, and compared to like other teams around your budget range? What was the key difference between you guys succeeding and them not?
One of the benefits of having a full Western roster is that this is what we said from the very start, was that we will never ever be able to be out-communicated by a mixed team. It's just not possible. Our communication has to be at a high enough level where the only teams that can compete with us in like a team play and a communication aspect are teams like Dallas or like full Korean teams or full Western teams. Any team that has a mixed team that doesn't have like perfect language, we cannot allow it to like them to have better team play than us. If they have better mechanics, they have better mechanics, but they can't have better team play. And I think that was a massive factor, especially if you start to talk about like those like Vancouver, those Boston, like those teams around us which like are slightly mixed. I think we were able to, like, especially in team play metas, right? Like, if you're starting to look at the Ryan comp, obviously, but then the Junker Queen comp and the Winston comp at the end, those, like, macro metas, those team play metas, we were able to do very good because everybody in our team was able to communicate at a high level, listen at a high level. We did various PowerPoints or VOD reviews at the start about, like, how to access, like, level 1, level 2, level 3 communication and stuff like that. And that was a real mantra for us, which is that if teams out-mechanic us and beat us, that's life, but no team will have better team play and no team will have better communication.
Spyler mentioned this on a stream a while back, that sort of like your best aspect of a coach was that you essentially had no deficits. Like you were always good when it came to game knowledge, interpersonal relationships, leadership, communication, as you just mentioned, and whatnot. So do you tend to agree with that? And if not, what do you think is your strongest aspect as a coach?
I always thought that to be a really good head coach, you have to be able to do both, you know? Like there's a lot of head coaches which only do like the motivation side and a lot of them that only do the like Overwatch side. But I really think that if you want to be a good head coach, you have to do both. I think if you're good at one, it makes the other one, like the players buy into this side if they also believe in this side. And I think that was like my goal. Like I think there is almost certainly coaches in the league that have better motivation or leadership style. I'm almost certain there is better coaches who understand Overwatch better than me. But I like to think if you put them all together, that I become quite a well-rounded coach. And I think that was like my idea. I think that if I can explain to a player how I want them to play, and they see it and trust it, then when I also tell him, I also really think you should go to bed at 10 p.m. tonight and wake up at 8 a.m. and go for a run, it makes it more believable, you know? If you're one of these coaches which is like doesn't understand the game at all, I think it becomes quite easy for players to buy out of your system because like, oh, well, this guy's just a motivational coach. He just like reads mantras and we have to follow it. But I think if they can see that, like, I understand the game and I understand the aspects of being an athlete and being a professional, I think that becomes like a strength for any like head coach. But I think myself included.
More on that Overwatch side, what is your general philosophy towards the game and towards teams as well?
I think what I do different to other coaches is like, I always coach to how to win a map as opposed to win team fights. You know, like I think a lot of coaches just say, this fight, we should do this, we should do this, we should do this. But what I'm saying is, actually, this fight is nowhere near as important as the one that's about to come. So we need to make sure that we don't put ourselves in a position, even if we lose this first fight, to lose the next fight. And I think that our team, especially as the season went on, like I think that was a big thing for us, was stage one. People were maybe not super bought into the way that I see Overwatch. But as we started to see results, everyone just became like, yeah, let's just play this way, you know? And I think that's why the second half of the season was so good for us, was because I think that it ended up like, that's how we wanted to play. So I think my style is a lot more about discipline. I probably dry fight more than any other coach in the Overwatch League. I'm very religious about, like, I have areas of the maps where you're not allowed to use certain, like, tier 1 ults are not allowed to be used in this part of the map or this part of the map or this part of the map. So I do a lot of stuff about, like, the ult economy, and then what I desperately try to do is create a system. Like I think this is what I learned from like KDG and Fusion in season 3 was you need to have like a neutral theory, you need to have a how to hold a choke theory, you need to have a retake theory, you need to have an ult disadvantage theory, you need to have an ult advantage theory, and you need to have a system of how to push payload and how to stop payload. If you have like those 7 things, and the ult economy is obviously a bit more like expansive, then that's my goal. If I have those 7 things in every single meta, then everybody knows how to play. And that's like the ultimate goal. Is what we always said was a true test of a good team is this. If every single player can tell me, I can pause, we check the ults, we check the outs, and every single player can independently tell me what everyone is going to do. This fight, we're going to go first. Harry's going to do this. Sparker's going to flank like this. If all 5 players, if you quiz them independently, come up with the same answer, that's how you make a team. If everybody has different ideas about how they should play each situation, then you will never get the same level of team play which I think you want. And that was always my goal, and especially in these macro metas. Okay, this ult, we have 3 ults, they have 1. It's throughout our second point. I know exactly, Admiral knows how Harry's going to play. Harry knows how Landon's going to play. Landon knows how Backbone's going to play. And I think that type of thing, that was like our goal. And that's one of the reasons why I felt like week 1 was always a bit ropey, but once you started to get into week 2 and week 3 of a stage, I think we started to look stronger.
With the Palace Eternal rebranding to Las Vegas soon, what is it like representing EU and even UK Overwatch at such a high level, not to mention you and Commander X, British coaches as well?
I think it's really nice. I think I've got like a lot of DMs, and I think we've got a lot of support from European fans, maybe even fans that were on like Paris last year. People that say, yeah, I really wanted Europe to be represented. It was like a bit disappointing, especially when there was a time when like both Paris and London were like full Korean basically. What I really wanted to become was London would become a destination where any like up and coming European player, the first team they want to join, I mean, ultimately maybe they want to join like Gladiators or Shock or one of like the big boys, but the first destination was I would love to join London. I'd love to like learn their system, play within their system, grow, and then if after that I move on up, then that's okay. But I think that's what I wanted, and that was obviously the problem we had in the first off season was no one wanted to join London. And I'm hopeful in this off-season that's no longer the case.
Last question, and this is linked to the off-season. I'm sure you can't disclose too much, and maybe you haven't even thought about it that much, but what are like your plans for 2023?
I think our plans will become very similar. I don't know when you're going to like post this, but I think it's not impossible that our off-season is completed within a week. Most teams are in a situation where they are like, let everybody go in free agent, but I think we will 100% be the first team finished with the off season. I think we already have a very solid idea of the players that we want, and I'm hopeful that they are as enthusiastic to join us as we are to have them to join us, if that was good English. And then I think we're in a situation where I've always believed, because I'm a big football fan, and I've always believed, especially being a Manchester United fan, that the teams that get their business in the off season done first are always the best. If you're one of these teams that's like a week before the deadline and you're scrambling, trying to find players, blah, 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 you're always going to make a mess. So we very quickly assessed where we wanted to add players or do whatever, and I think we were in a situation where we started very, very fast. So I think you will see a very similar London Spitfire in terms of like the team identity and the team culture. And I think it's very possible that we are finished our off season within a week from today.
Side tangent question. You said you're a big football fan. I'm sure you're aware of like 2016 Leicester City, 1 in 5,000 odds of winning the BPL, and they did it. Did you even like compare or even think that like you guys were almost akin to like Leicester City in 2016, like against the world?
Yeah, in a way, maybe in a way. I think there was times I dreamed about, like especially after we beat Gladiator Place, I go to bed, I think, what if we won the league or stuff like that. But I think it was always, I mean, yeah, I'm sure Leicester said the same early on too, like, oh yeah, there's no chance we actually win the league. But I mean, there were certain similarities. I think that Leicester team obviously became like a very good group. I think that Leicester team also had some like absolutely world-class players, which people didn't realise were world-class at the time, right? Like prime N'Golo Kante, prime Mahrez and stuff like that. But I definitely saw like some similarities for sure in terms of like the underdog aspect. Like the same, with Leicester, like they kept on improving, and at some point you thought, oh, it's going to break, but it never did. It was kind of the same for us, right? Like our season started to graph like this, and everyone was like, oh, well, it's going to dip in stage 3, it's going to dip in stage 4, it's going to dip in playoffs, but it kind of kept going. And I think that there was like a similar aspect to Leicester in terms of that.